lately about a couple of recurring themes in the contemporary world and how earlier philosophers might contribute to a deeper understanding of some of these issues. I want to mention two of these issues in particular. The first is the extreme skepticism, even cynicism, that seems to accompany a lot of our social interactions and a lot of our political life, frankly. I recall that there was a study in the New York Times back in 2015, maybe early 2016, that I discussed with my class. And it was a survey which found that Americans were never more resistant to scientific truth than they currently are. I think there's a second issue that has really caught my attention, and that is the really breakthrough findings in the field of neuropsychiatry over the last maybe the last 2 years in particular. Terms such as neurogenesis that seem to come out of a lot of the research in this area are very intriguing, as are some of the works that have crossed over into the popular domain. Books such as Moneyball and Thinking Fast and Slow really are quite remarkable in what they say about the intersection of the brain and our what has been a traditional concern of philosophers, our will. So the philosopher I think might be useful to consider in this regard, in regard to these two questions, is René Descartes. This is an old copy of Descartes' philosophy, which is itself an old philosophy. I should begin by saying that Descartes stood on the shoulders, as we like to say, of his predecessors, and most importantly, the shoulders of the great ancient Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle. And in one particular regard, I think Descartes picked up the mantle from these seminal thinkers. And that is, for both Plato and Aristotle, the human being is not born with an understanding of reality. This seemingly trivial truth drew the attention of Plato in particular. In his great opus, The Republic, he has a wonderful and very influential section called The Allegory of the Cave, in which Plato makes the case that our initial introduction to reality is one of bondage and ignorance. He compares us to prisoners chained by the neck, significantly, in a cave from infancy, really. And the message is that, a very Descartesian message, that reality, an understanding of reality, is not something we're born with. And we have to exert a little bit of skepticism about that. In the political world, of course, we know there's lots of research to suggest that most of us are socialized into the ways, the norms, beliefs, and attitudes about the political world by what sociologists call agents of socialization. This particular aspect of the human condition also drew the attention of Sigmund Freud. Freud was struck by the long period of dependency that the human being undergoes. So Descartes falls within this tradition, and his suggestion is that we need to be courageous, and thereby we need to be critical about where our ideas come from. In a way, Descartes is kind of an early deconstructionist. And by that I mean he's asking us to deconstruct our beliefs and ideas to see where they came from. It also happens to be a good therapeutic practice, I guess you would say. But he wants us to uh, exercise this kind of detached observation in the service of something greater than just a mere parlor game. He wants us to do this so that we can, in a way, liberate our mind from the often inchoate suggestions that the brain offers up. I'm sorry. And in terms of modern parlance, one term that recurs in neuropsychiatry quite a bit is the idea of an ant, an automatic negative thought. So if you think about what Descartes is saying, we need to kind of sit in judgment of these ideas as they pass through our mind. We need to be critical of them, not work with them, but exercise skepticism and ask ourselves where they come from. Now, certainly some ants just pass through the mind like a random idea that comes out of nowhere. But with more important ideas, our sense of selves, our sense of value, and what it is that we value, these ideas he suggests that we exert extreme scrutiny over. But I think the more important legacy that Descartes' philosophy offers us is the idea that your mind can serve as a ruler, really, over the ideas that influence our behavior. And it allows one to become comfortable as a thinking subject and not to be afraid of these ideas, these random ideas that might come our way. It is in our control through the use of a skeptical stance to control these ideas, and if not to control them, perhaps in a more Zen-like way, to detach from them and exercise lordship over them. And I think the kind of confidence in one's mind is a residue of Descartes' philosophy. Now, Descartes is unique for lots of other contributions, certainly ones that we can't necessarily go into today. But he's considered to be one of the modern philosophers in the sense that he posits the idea of a subject, a human subject, consciousness, that is more primordial, more important than the reactive, by rote actions that we might undertake. And the idea of being empowered by the power of consciousness is something that really runs right through modern philosophy into contemporary philosophies such as existentialism and what have you. So I want to encourage you to pick up a copy of Descartes' Meditations. The translations are pretty good. They're quite friendly and approachable. Descartes himself is very approachable, and I think we have to put aside, as we read these great seminal works, the idea that this is the domain of professional philosophy and not regular citizens. Some of the best philosophers of the 20th century and our new century were not academic philosophers at all. They were artists, great psychiatrists, such as Freud and Jung, for example, and many, many others. Wonderful philosophers. Certainly great musical performers. There's lots of wonderful philosophy in music and dance, too. So philosophy is very generous, very approachable, and very liberating. And I hope you enjoy reading René Descartes.